Hello everyone, I'm going to be going over the last few steps of putting our game together. The first thing I just want to mention is I've done some reorganizing in the file system over here. So in the scene folder, I created a folder to contain my different sort of levels for the game. So my scene with all the pieces from set 1 and from set 2. So those are here. If you're not using both sets, that's okay, but I do recommend still doing some sort of levels folder, whatever you happen to be calling it, that is only holding the scene or scenes that hold everything together for each set of pieces. I've organized the different pieces into set 1 and set 2 to keep those organized, and then I have a shared directory that I'm using as well, and then still the menu over here. So next up, what I'm going to be doing is creating the script to use for my menu. So I'm going to click on the plus icon to add a script, just always making sure I'm using the script location. So that looks great. And I'm going to keep the ready function and remove process. And I'm going to do a combination of copying and pasting some code over and doing a couple of things manually, depending on what's necessary. All right, so I'm just going to paste some code in here to get started. So I have two variables that are global. So they're both at onReady, so they're being calculated before the ready function runs to make sure that they're available when they're needed. So the first variable represents and it's both the types are labels. The first one represents our directions label, and so we're accessing the scene tree to get the first node in the group called directions. Now directions happens to be the only node that has the directions group, which is why I can use get first node and know exactly what it's going to be returning. Almost the same thing here for message. We have only one node that has the message group. So for set message, for my win and lose messages, I'm accessing the scene tree to get the first node in the group for the group message. All right, next up, I'm going to be adding a few things into the ready function. All right, so what's happening here is I have from the global autoload script, I'm accessing the level 1 signal and I'm connecting it to an upcoming level 1 function. Same thing for level loss. So I'm accessing the global autoload to grab this level loss signal and then connecting it to an upcoming function. It's all red and complaining because those functions haven't been created yet. I'm going to ignore that for now and just move on. Now, the last part of the ready function is I'm just taking the node for set message and I'm turning the visibility to false so that this doesn't show at the very start when the game first runs, because I only want my directions, not my message at that stage. I'm going to ignore the warning for a little bit and I'm going to add a couple of other functions. All right, so this is a custom function to control the visibility of the menu itself. So when this runs, it's impacting the root node where the script is connected, and it's setting the visible state of that node to equal not visible. So each time it runs, it just toggles back and forth between those two states. So if the menu is currently visible and this runs, it's going to not be visible. If the menu is hidden and not visible when this runs, it's going to switch to being visible. So it just lets you toggle back and forth when you have something equal not something, and an exclamation point just equals not. All right. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my play button signal. So for when it's pressed, I'm just going to double click, connect that to my menu script, and still getting some complaining, but I'm going to be adding those soon. So I'm just going to ignore it for now. All right, so I have this function for when the play button is pressed. I'm just going to add a descriptive comment here. All right, so when the play button is pressed, I'm going to toggle off the visibility of the menu so that it hides, and I'm also going to change the visibility state of both the directions and set message variable. So directions are no longer going to be visible because that's going to be set to false, and set message, which is currently hidden, is going to be set to true. All right, now before I can add the last part of this function, I just need to go back over into my global script, and I'm going to be adding two new signals. I'm going to be adding a signal for when play is pressed and a signal for when quit is pressed. And that's because I'm going to be using another scene to control both my game scenes and my menu so that I can turn them on and off independent or load them independently of each other and restart without having to mess with each other. All right, so now that I have those signals added into my global auto load script, I can add a signal emission from my play pressed, and this is just letting me know when play has been pressed so that later on I can do some things as a result of that. So that looks all set. I'm going to be adding my function for when quit is pressed in the same way. So I'm just going to go over to quit and adding a pressed signal to the script. Just going to get rid of the extra spaces here. All right, and the only thing that this function is doing is going to be sending the quit press signal. All right, next up, I have those two connected functions that don't exist yet, and it's complaining about them. So I'm going to add a function for when the level is 1. All right, so this is the same function name that was connected up in the ready function to the level 1 signal. And so all this is doing is accessing the set message variables text, and it's changing the text from the placeholder to a message saying that you won. This can be any string that you want it to be when you're accessing the text. So it's changing the text first and then toggling the menu visibility so it's turning from off back to on. All right, and the level lost function is nearly identical. So I have this level lost function. It's the exact same name as what's connected to my level lost signal. So you can see that warning has gone away, and it's accessing the text of set message and changing the placeholder text or whatever text is currently active to a message about losing. And then just toggling the menu visibility to the opposite state, which in this case is turning it from off back on. And that is it for my menu script. So I am going to save right there. Next up is working on the controller scene that's going to control the entire game. So I'm going to switch to the 3D tab so that when I press Command N to make a new scene, it'll make a scene instead of making a script. And I'm just going to go to plus other node, and I'm going to choose node, and I'm going to name this controller. And just make that lowercase. All right, I'm going to grab my menu scene and drag it over the controller there. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. All right, here we go. Now, when I was dragging the menu from the file system to the scene tree, what that does is it creates an instance of the menu or a copy of the menu. And so I can make changes over here, and I can also go back into the original as needed and make updates there. Now, you can make instances in a couple of ways: by dragging from the file system, by clicking on this little link icon, and also in the script itself. So I'm going to be adding my game scene through a script instead of adding it directly. This way I can add a cool function to control which game scene is going to be active, which game level is going to be active. So I'm going to start just by going over to the controller here, plus to create the script, and I'm going to make sure it's saving in my script location. And I'm just going to create that. I have a script that is already ready to go, so I am just going to copy and paste that over. And now I'll walk you through what is actually going on in the script. All right, here we go. So first of all, I have a single variable, and this represents the level that's going to be loaded from my levels folder. And it's a type of node, and for now it's null, it's empty, there's nothing there at the very start. It's just going to be the menu at the beginning. Inside of the ready function, I'm connecting my quit pressed and my play pressed signals to custom functions to quit the game and also to load the level. First up, I have my custom function to quit the game. Now, I can't immediately quit because there might be things running that cause problems. So I'm going to use this method called call deferred, and it just makes sure that everything in the current frame is finished processing before continuing on with the function that is listed right here. So up next, I have that deferred quit game function, and it's going to access the scene tree to quit. And that's all you need to actually quit the game, though you should do call deferred just to make sure it's quitting cleanly. And that's particularly important if you're ever doing a game where you're saving data that you're going to come back to. Well, it's not the case here, still a best practice. All right, now next up, I've actually moved my restart event from the move and set script. All right, so that was originally in my move and set script. So over here, I have if the event is action press restart, I'm getting the C and reloading the current scene. Now, there are two reasons that I'm changing this. Number one is this is for moving and setting the pieces. Everything has to do with movement. So keeping this action here for when I'm restarting the game doesn't really fit, doesn't belong. So I could leave it, but I'm going to move it somewhere where it does make a little bit more sense. So I'm just going to delete that entirely and move on. So back in the controller, I still have that function for the input, which is accessing just any of the key presses. And so I still have if the input event is the restart action being pressed. This time I'm going to create my own function to control how the level is loaded. Now, the reason that I don't want to just reload the current scene when I'm doing this is that when I'm using my menu and I want to be able to control the visibility of that, it's going to get in the way. So I need to do this in a different way compared to how I did before. So I have my custom function for loading the level. First, I'm just checking to see if there is a level. So exclamation point equals means is not. So if the loaded level is not null, if the loaded level actually exists, then I want to remove the loaded level from the tree. And once it's been removed from the tree, it's still there. It might be finishing processing, but after it's been removed, then I'm going to queue free to remove it completely. So it gets removed from memory. It doesn't exist at all. Now, I have some more that I want to do to load, but I want to make sure that this has actually been freed entirely before running the rest of the code. And so that's where call deferred comes in again. So I have a deferred load level function that is right here. And this is going to be the part that actually does the loading once the previous level, if it exists, has been removed. So I have a few variables. First one up is representing the directory name. So this is where the levels are located. You can easily, if you don't know what you want the path to be, when you come over to the file system, you can just right click, copy the path, and then you can paste it, and it'll just put it all in for you perfectly, and you don't actually need to find anything. So that's something that can be pretty helpful. Next up, we have a variable that's representing the file names as an array. So this is using a class called direct access to get files at this location, so for a direct name. And then it's taking the file names and picking random for this new variable called random scene, and it's going to be getting that file name as a string. All right, so the next variable is going to be for the scene path that we're going to load. And so it's going to be combining all of this information together. So it's using the directory name to get that part of the location, and then it's combining it together with the name of the random scene that's been generated. And something that happens when you're using get files at from direct access when you export is it resets all of the paths based on the exported app, and it adds. So let's go back and preview, and now that is all working as it should be. Perfect. Now it goes into my first level, and I'm just going to try to win. All right, there we go. If I play again, let's see if I lose. I can lose. I'm going to my other, oh, lost that there. I'm going into my other scene because it's randomly picking one. There we go. So I can play, R to reset, and switching back and forth between those randomly. All right, I am just going to lose really quickly, and I can quit the game. So switching over to the 3D tab and Command N, I'm going to go to Other Node, and I'm going to look for Marker 3D. And markers can be used to access a location, so to keep track of where things are. I'm just going to call this spawn point, and I'm going to create a group called spawn to represent this marker. And that is all I'm doing in this scene. I'm just adding the marker 3D, adding the spawn group, and I'm going to save it in my shared scene location. And one last thing I want to mention about the marker before I move on is all it is this little widget that represents the location and rotation. And so again, it's really helpful for moving things to different locations. So I'm going to head over into my game script, and I'm going to be setting the marker location. So I'm going to, first of all, just drag my spawn point in as an instance, while moving copies of it to a few different locations. So for my first spawn point, I'm going to go about to the location of my first shape over here. So I want to keep whole numbers for the transform values for X and Z. And I always want 2.7 for the height because that is what the movement script and the scoring sort of is based on. All right, so I'll use that as my first location. I might come back here and make changes to it later. And I'm going to just duplicate that with Command D to have another spawn location. I'm going to slide this over probably somewhere around here. I'm going to put that to 3, have that a little bit lower down. And I'm going to duplicate, and then somewhere over here for the location. So I guess I'll go with 8, 2.7, and 0, and see how that goes. All right, I'm going to do the same thing for my other level. If you only have one level, you don't need to worry about it. You can just stick with one. But I'm going to actually try using those same spawn points. So I'm just going to copy and paste. So I have spawn points in those same 3 locations. It doesn't matter that I don't have the right number of pieces. I can have more spawn points than pieces. I just don't want to have fewer spawn points than pieces. All right, so that looks good. From either game scene, doesn't matter which one. If you only have one, that's okay. I'm just going to create a new script, save it in the script directory, and I'm just going to rename this to Randomize because that's what the script is doing. And I'm just going to grab my script and replace what's here. All right, so at the start, we have 2 onReady variables so that they're running before the ready function to make sure that they're available when they're needed. And so they are both going to be arrays. The first one is creating an array for all of the spawn points. So it's getting the scene tree, getting the nodes in the group, and that group is spawn. The next array is doing the exact same thing, but it's making an array for pieces instead. So again, getting the scene tree, getting all the nodes in the group pieces. So creating 2 arrays with all the items from each group. Now, in the ready function, I'm just going to run an upcoming custom function called makeRandom, and this is going to randomize the piece location and rotation at the very start when the game scene is loaded. Next up, we have that custom function. So there is a variable that represents the rotation of the pieces, and this is an integer. And what I'm actually doing is I made an array with the 4 different rotations that I want to use just for the 90-degree angles. And I've added the pick random method to the end of that. And what that does is it randomly returns any of the numbers, well, in this case, the numbers inside this array. And then the pieces array is shuffled so it gets randomly ordered. All right, so next up I'm comparing the size of the arrays. So if the spawn array has more items than the pieces array, it's also going to be shuffling the spawn array to be randomized for the order. All right, so next up I have a for loop, and it's accessing a range of the pieces array, and size is just returning the number in the array. And so for everything in that array, it is accessing an index number, and I here just represents the index number for the pieces in that range. So if the index number is less than the spawn size, that means that there's actually more pieces than spawn points, because GDScript uses 0-based indexing. When there's an array of 3, the index numbers would be 0, 1, and 2. And so if, for example, this had a number of 3, then there are 3 spawn points, but the highest number is going to be 2. So this is just comparing if there's the correct number. So for anything where the spawn size has an equivalent in the pieces array, what it's going to do is it's going to set the pieces item with the index number, and it's taking the global position and it's changing it to the equivalent item in the spawn array, so using that same index number. For the rotation, so the pieces array for that index number, it's accessing the rotation degrees .y, and it's adding the piece rotation from this random number in that variable. Now, otherwise, there's an incorrect number of spawn locations, so we're just going to let ourselves know that. So there's a variable for missing the location, and it's just subtracting the spawn size from the pieces size. And so that's letting us know how many extra pieces there are or how many spawn locations we're missing. Then just a print statement to let us know that this number of spawn locations is missing and needs to be added to work properly. All right, so I'm going to save my randomized script and I'm going to move it over to my game scene as well, and I can just drag and drop. Oh, that is all set. Perfect. So now I'm going to save and go back over to the controller and preview, and we'll see what happens. All right, so everything looks perfect in the menu itself. You can see when I reload the different locations. Now, some of these spawn points might be a little bit too far out to be exactly ideal. So I might want to move the one in the upper corner a little bit lower, I think. I think the other ones aren't bad, but I certainly can experiment. Like the one on the right should probably be moved over a little bit to the left. I think the bottom corner is not bad, but I think the other two I might want to move in both of the scenes. So that is just a matter of refining. So you can certainly experiment with locations that you think look right to you. Like this one is maybe a little too far. I'm going to try -4 instead. Let's see, over here, I'm going to try 7 instead. And I'm going to go over here as well. And try -3 and 7, and we'll see how that goes. All right, so I think that definitely completely fixed the placement on the right, and I think that the left isn't bad, though I might want to move my camera very slightly higher up. But at this point, it's just a matter of personal preference. I can play around with the camera angle, I can play around with the colors, I can see if there are other capabilities that I want to add, but as far as the gameplay, I think this is all that I'm going to go with. And I'll be back with another video for actually exporting.